Well, it is time now for A Week in France, our roundup of the major headlines making French news over the past 7 days. Well, more political chaos is sure to come this week after France's lower house of parliament rejected a wealth tax as expected. Now proposed by the left, the so-called Zucmantax would have imposed a minimum 2% levy on wealth of over 100 million euros and also respond to widespread public support for getting the country's wealthiest to shoulder what many see as their fair burden of rising debt. Lawmakers, though, apparently see things otherwise, meaning that the specter of new legislative elections again looms. Charlotte Lamb with more.
Contre. Il est rejeté.
An overwhelming no from French MPs, rejecting 2 left-wing wealth tax proposals. They voted down the so-called Zucmantax, inspired by economist Gabriel Zucman. It's a 2% levy on fortunes over 100 million euros. Pushed by a coalition of left-wing parties. MPs also knocked back swing party the Socialists' softer proposal and bid to find middle ground, a 3% on assets above 10 million with more exemptions.
You
can see that there is a profound disagreement about the reality of the basis for these amendments and taxes. No, there is profound disagreement. Take things seriously.
The Socialists expected defeat, but have warned they could bring down Sébastien Lecornu's government if the ultra-rich aren't made to pay more.
What is at stake is bigger than us. And you have accepted, as we do, the promise of compromise, the promise of seeking the common good and the general interest. I fear that your stubbornness is leading you down the wrong path. I tell you, Mr. Prime Minister, there has not been the slightest compromise since we have been in this chamber.
To calm tempers, Lecornu says he's open to lifting the freeze on pensions and welfare benefits in his 2026 budget. The government's draft also includes a 2% tax on assets held in private holding companies, not tied to business activity. Still, Friday was a win for Conservatives.
Zucman, c'était juste de la taxe mania.
Zucman was just tax mania, and our obsession in this budget is to protect the French people from any tax increases.
One thing's clear, France's parliament remains deeply divided since the president lost his majority last year. And this vote could now rattle the country's fragile minority government.
Well, a court in Paris sentenced 4 Bulgarian men to between 2 and 4 years in prison this week for their roles in vandalizing the capital's Holocaust memorial. In a context of fears of rising anti-Semitism against the backdrop of the war in Gaza, last year hundreds of red hands were spray painted on a wall honoring those who helped rescue Jews during the Second World War. Well, French intelligence services believe that the acts were a part of a larger destabilization campaign by the Kremlin. Shirley Sitbon.
In May 2024, Bulgarian men carried out a vandalism operation in Paris. One booked tickets and hotel reservations, 2 others sprayed 500 red hands, while the 4th filmed them. The images were then shared on social media. The main target was the Holocaust memorial, where the men sprayed 35 hands on the wall honoring those who saved Jews during the Second World War. A security guard chased them away. Hours later, they were on a bus to Brussels before heading back to Bulgaria. CCTV footage allowed police to locate their hotel, identify them and their phone lines. French intelligence services believe the case is part of a Russian destabilization attempt. Defense lawyers don't disagree, but they say their clients had no knowledge of this.
When the red hands were graffitied, it was filmed and posted and shared on Russian social media accounts. That's one of the reasons they say Russia is involved. It's also linked to other similar cases, but there's no material evidence linking my client to Russia.
The suspected motive for the vandalism, generating fear and chaos at a time when France faces growing anti-Semitism and hate crimes. The Jewish community was the target of 2 other operations. Blue Stars of David were sprayed in several neighborhoods. Green paint was sprayed on synagogues and again on the memorial. Muslims were targeted in a more recent case in September, where foreigners placed pig heads outside several mosques before fleeing France.
Now, in a surprising vote this week, France's parliament adopted a national rally-initiated resolution calling for the repeal of a 1968 agreement between France and Algeria. Though it passed by just one vote, it is a large symbolic victory for the far right. If that non-binding vote is eventually made concrete by the president or prime minister, the only two with the power to do so, it would put an end to granting Algerian citizens special residency and immigration rights, as Olivia Bizot explains.
With 185 in favor and 184 against, it has been adopted by the National Assembly.
A dramatic moment in France's National Assembly. A resolution championed by the far-right National Rally passed by a single vote. The motion challenges the 1968 Franco-Algerian agreement, which for decades has given Algerian citizens special rights in France relating to residency, immigration and work. Some MPs have argued that the special legal status granted to Algerians undermines the principle of equality enshrined in the constitution. Marine Le Pen celebrated what she called a symbolic victory, helped, she said, by votes from the right.
I welcome this victory and I congratulate the groups that remain consistent with their views.
Critics say that given the country's sensitive colonial history, ending the agreement could strain relations with Algeria and affect Algerian communities in France. Some on the left also criticised Macronist MPs for their absence during the vote, saying it compromised French-Algeria relations.
What we saw in the chamber is unacceptable. It's intolerable. Their absence handed a victory to the National Rally on a racist text that undermines our relations with Algeria.
This motion sends a strong political message to the government. But for it to have any legal effect, France would need to draft and pass formal legislation through both the National Assembly and the Senate.
And other French judicial news this week, French prosecutors sought suspended prison terms of 3 to 12 months for defendants accused of cyberbullying the First Lady. Now, this case, of course, surrounds the conspiracy theories about Brigitte Macron's gender, largely spurred by the far-right influencer across the Atlantic in the U.S., Candace Owens. Yinka Oyetade has the details.
A heartfelt testimony from Brigitte Macron's daughter on the second and final day of the First Lady's cyberbullying trial. Tiffaine Ozier taking the stand to speak about the toll of false claims spread online, claims that her mother was born a man.
I'd like to express what her life looks like since she was the target of massive cyberbullying. This has led to a deterioration in her living conditions. This has repercussions on her children and grandchildren. They hear things at school such as, "Your grandmother is a man." I don't know how to make it stop.
Prosecutors are seeking suspended prison sentences of between 3 and 12 months for the 10 defendants. They're accused of spreading the unsubstantiated rumours and making malicious remarks about the 24-year age gap between Brigitte and President Emmanuel Macron. The heaviest penalties are being requested for 3 of the accused, including 41-year-old publicist Aurélien Poisson-Atlan, known online as Zoé Zagan. He could be hit with a 12-month suspended prison sentence, an €8,000 fine, and a 6-month suspension of his social media accounts. In court, Poisson-Atlan defended his right to what he called satire.
It was satire, particularly on my account. The stories were stories. It was imaginary, you know? That's the definition of stories.
Other defendants have cast the trial as a bid by France's ruling elite to stifle free speech. It comes just months after a separate defamation lawsuit the Macrons filed in the United States against conservative podcaster Candace Owens, who's repeated the same allegations. The couple is reportedly planning to offer scientific evidence and photos proving that the First Lady is not transgender.
That's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned. There's more news and analysis coming up here on France 24, as always.